welcome to the Fourth Branch program. Glad you can make it. I am MD. This program is dedicated exclusively for those with common sense, a spirit of patriotism, and a determination for a more perfect union. Stay tuned as we begin the discussion of a very important, interesting, and enlightening topic. Hope to hear from you soon. Happy listening.
Ignorance is the biggest threat to any democracy. John F. Kennedy said, "The ignorance of one voter in a democracy impairs the security of us all." Hello everyone, I am MD and this is the Fourth Branch program. First, a warning. This program is not suitable for all audiences. I repeat, the content of this program is not for everyone. To find out if it's suitable to you, answer the following two questions. Question number one: would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? Question number two: would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Once again, question one: would you entrust your teenage daughter to a known rapist? And question number two: would you have a known pedophile cared for your toddler? Your time is up. If you had difficulty answering either question, this program is not for you. If you answer yes to both questions, this program is definitely not for you. But if both of your answers are absolutely not, this program is catered to you. You should stick around. It is interesting, informative, and educational. I'll be right back.
Join me here on the Fourth Branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday.
We are discussing the topic back to the entitlement fight. We began the discussion of this topic a couple of days ago, triggered exclusively by an interview that Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader for the Republican Party, gave to Bloomberg, in which he said, addressing the problem of the national debt, number one, it is a bipartisan problem. And number two, his solution to remedy the situation is to cut Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, any benefit that is currently being provided to either the middle class or people who are less fortunate. A couple of days ago, we debated the Social Security aspect, in which we provided great detail as to the importance of Social Security. Now, before we give you a sort of a reminder, refresher as to why this conversation is important, let's give you a little bit of history about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. In 1935, the 32nd President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, signed into law the Social Security Act. It was meant as a way to take care of the aged after they had contributed into the system. They have become old, they can no longer work, and they retire. So Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Social Security Act. Now, it is important to note that, as usual, all Republicans were against Social Security. Fast forward to the future, 1961. Lyndon Johnson gave a speech at the White House in regard to the aging population. At that time, he was thinking mostly in terms of healthcare. That was the beginning of a movement in which Mr. Lyndon Johnson proposed to provide healthcare to those who have advanced in age. And on July 1965, Lyndon Johnson signed into law the Title 18 added to the Social Security Act, which states that from that point forward, individuals who are 65 or older would be provided healthcare assistance. It is important to note once again, all Republicans voted against it. Now, you cannot possibly imagine your life without Social Security or Medicare. You were probably born into it. You have heard about it, although you may have not anything to do with it, at least yet. But it is a program that has been around since 1935. Your parents, or possibly your grandparents, have benefited of it. And since 1965, Medicare has been around providing healthcare assistance to those advanced in age. Now, I mentioned that for a reason. It's because as I mentioned in the beginning of the program, that Mitch McConnell proposed as solution to the growing national debt to cut Social Security and to cut Medicare and Medicaid. Now, most often than not, whenever Republicans, legislators, propose a cut into any program or any benefit, they usually frame it as if what the beneficiaries are receiving are handouts from the government. As such, it is in government's purview to decide to cut or to even eliminate the program. Now, I'm here to tell you, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, that both Social Security and Medicare are not handouts from the government. In the program that I had this morning, I mentioned that you put money into Social Security. You put money into Medicare. If you look at your pay stub, you would notice that there is a line item for Social Security and there is a line item for Medicare. Translation: while you were working, you invested into those items. So when you get old, when you can no longer work, it is rightfully due to you by the government to return in smaller chunks the amount of money that you've been putting in the system. It's not a handout. Republicans have been trading in deception in general. They rely a great deal on the ignorance of their constituent in order to advance their agenda. It is absolutely extremely rare that you will find Republicans trying to advance an agenda or a piece of legislation and propose that solution based on accurate information. And there is a reason for that. It's because more often than not, they do not have a logical reason to do something or to undo something. When Republicans opposed Social Security, there were no reason for them to do that, but they did anyway. When they opposed Medicare, there were no logical reason to do that, but they did that. And just recently, when all the Republicans in Washington opposed Obamacare, there were no logical reason to do that, but they did anyway. So they have to trade in deception. Now back to Medicare. The reason I take issue in the proposition by Mitch McConnell to cut Social Security and Medicare is because, number one, I do remember that 60% of the people living in the United States said no when Republicans proposed the idea of taking borrowing $1.5 trillion to distribute mostly to large corporations and wealthy individuals. 60%, that's a majority. In a democratic system, when the majority says they want something or don't want something, usually the elected officials would go along with that. Republicans seems to be completely oblivious of what kind of system of government they live in. They completely ignore the majority in order to advance whatever agenda that they have. And for that reason, they have to trade in deception. You may not recall that when Republicans came with the idea of borrowing $1.5 trillion, they were promoting that idea under the banner of a tax cut for the people. You may have remembered Paul Ryan, Mitch McConnell, all the Republicans were out there beating the drum that it is the right thing to do because they are proposing a tax cut for the people. Mind you, 60% of those same people said, no, we don't want that. We don't want to borrow money for a tax cut because the economy is doing well. We are doing okay. It is not a time to be borrowing money for ridiculous reason. And the reason they went forward anyway, it's because the tax cut was never intended for the working people. It was intended for a large corporation and wealthy individual. He is the proof of that. $1.2 trillion out of the 1.5 went to large corporation and wealthy individual. This is not a speculation. This is not an assumption. This is how the money was reported. $1.2 trillion went to large corporation and wealthy individual. The other $300 billion went to distribute among the masses, meaning you and me, we the people. We only receive a very small piece of the pie. The green piece that you're seeing on your screen is what was distributed among the people. Now, why do you think the Republicans were out there beating the drum saying it's a tax cut for the people? Now, had they come to you and said the tax cut is for large corporation and wealthy individual, it is almost certain that we would have taken to the street and opposed that. So that's why Republicans have to trade in deception in order to advance their agenda. That's why they label the tax cut a tax cut for the people. Now, if you are providing a tax cut for the people, the larger portion should have gone to the people, not to large corporation, not to wealthy individual. The Republican legislators, and it is not something that's happening just today, has been trading in deception. That's how they get people to rally behind whatever that they have in mind. Now, what's worse, besides what I just mentioned to you, is the fact that the large portion of the money that was borrowed, and keep that in mind, it's not money that we have, it's money that was borrowed from China, from Japan, from European countries. Money was borrowed to give to large corporations. Mind you, at a time when business has been booming, business has been doing well. When Donald Trump walked into the Oval Office, business was doing extremely well. They were reporting record revenues. They were reporting record profit. It does not make any logical sense to any sound-minded individual that you would go and borrow money at a time when everything is going well. It just doesn't make any logical sense. But to the Republican legislators who did that, it made perfect sense. One, they give large deduction, tax cut to the large corporation and to the wealthy individual, which guarantees that they're going to receive finance campaign finance money when it's time for them to campaign for election and re-election. This is totally Machiavellian for any representative, the very individual we elected in office to work on our behalf, to do things that benefit us. Now, those are the very same individuals who actually work against our own interests. And this is not ranting, this is factual. They borrowed $1.5 trillion. They took $1.2 trillion out of that money, gave to large corporations and wealthy individuals, and distribute $300 billion to us. Now, I heard a few Republicans who said, I'm very grateful that I got $40, $60 extra on my paycheck. Of course you would be grateful. Why wouldn't you? Who would not be grateful that you would get an extra $40, $60 on your paycheck? But what missing in that picture, that I'm fairly certain those individuals that I have been talking to, that have been relating the fact that they're very grateful they get $40 or $60 on their paycheck, what they do not know, because that was not conveyed to them, is the legislation that the Republican passed for the $1.5 trillion tax cut. They are fully responsible to pay back that money. Now, let me put it in terms that you will be able to understand. Suppose your kid, your lovely son, your lovely daughter, went to the bank and borrowed $100,000. Not because there is a need. He or she has a good job. She's doing just fine. Have a great car. Have a great house. Everything is doing fine. There is no need for him or her to do that. But let's play along, because that's exactly what the Republican legislators did. So your lovely son went to the bank and borrowed $100,000. Now, the reason that your lovely son or daughter did that is because figure out that Uncle Joe's birthday is coming. And your lovely son wants to get on the good side of Uncle Joe because Uncle Joe happened to be a wealthy individual in the family. He has a mansion. He has tons of cars in his driveway. And your lovely son and daughter love going to Uncle Joe and spending time there because it is a paradise there. So, for Uncle Joe's birthday, your lovely son went to the bank, borrowed $100,000, and come to you and give you $10,000. Now you are absolutely grateful because the son that you love so much went to the bank, borrowed $100,000. Now, he or she may have not told you that he borrowed $100,000. Maybe that information was never passed to you. Or even if it were passed to you, it's totally irrelevant. The bottom line is, after your lovely son get $100,000 loan from the bank, he took $10,000 out of that $100,000 and give to you. Now, you cannot possibly have a better son than that. You get those $10,000, you're grateful for your son because you're grateful for that gesture. So your son takes the other $90,000 and buys some expensive gift for Uncle Joe. Uncle Joe did not need that gift. Uncle Joe didn't ask for the gift. As a matter of fact, it's almost a given that Uncle Joe couldn't care about the gift because Uncle Joe is a wealthy individual. He has everything that he so wishes. He's living a life of luxury. So $90,000 of whatever that gift is not impressive to Uncle Joe. But your lovely son wanted anyway to impress and give something valuable to Uncle Joe. So he did. Now, remember you got $10,000 also from your son? You're grateful. And that's really the analogy with those individuals who are so grateful that they see $40 or $60 on their paycheck and they're so grateful they receive that. Number one, it is not a permanent affair. Now, I could have made the example a little bit more exciting, more interesting for you. Instead of receiving $10,000 in a lump sum from your son, he could have decided to give you $1,000 every week for 10 weeks. Now, you would have been overly excited. And that particular scenario matches mostly so the $40 and $60 that those people who are so grateful they get $40 and $60 on their paycheck, so they're very grateful for that. So your son every week stop by, give you $1,000. You are elated. When you're talking to your neighbor, to other people about your son, he is the best thing that has happened to in your life because he's doing well, his life is great. In fact, every week he stops by and gives you $1,000. Of course, until the 10th week. After the 10th week, it's all stopped. In case you're not following the logic here, the $40 and $60 or $60 you're getting on your paycheck is not a permanent affair. It will stop. But that's not the end of the story. Within 6 months, you go to your mailbox, and to your great surprise, you get a statement, a billing statement from Bank of Hawaii that explains to you that your first payment will be due in 60 days and is what it is. And it is for the $100,000 that you borrowed, and they give you all the detail about how long it's going to take you to pay for it. And that's when you realize that your lovely son that was giving you $1,000 every week is not so lovely after all. Because the money that he borrowed from the bank and the money you were receiving every week, the $1,000, which at the end of the 10th week amount to $10,000, was just a small piece of the pie. He borrowed $100,000 and you used 90% of that money to buy a gift for Uncle Joe, who couldn't care less about that, and gave you $10,000. And hook you with a $100,000 bill. This is not a story. This is not a joke. This is not a speculation. This is reality. This is fact. The legislation that the Republican passed for those $1.5 trillion, that's exactly the way that it happened. They took $1.2 trillion out of that and gave to wealthy individuals and large corporations who did not ask for it, who did not care for it, who couldn't care less about it because the economy has been doing well. They've been doing well. They've been reporting record profits, record revenues. It is not the time that they would want any money from anybody. But nobody is going to refuse it. So you give it to them, they take it. So that's where we at. The government, your representative, your Republican representative, borrowed $1.5 trillion to give to large corporation and wealthy individual and stick you with a bill of $1.5 trillion. You only got 10% of that money. We, the people, only got 10% of that money. And tell me, why would you want to continue to support an individual who time and again do what's hurtful to you, what harmful to the country? Yes, when they're presenting it to you, they present it in a nice little package and tell you that this is good for you. You're going to get a tax cut. But had they explained to you what they meant, I am fairly confident you wouldn't have gone along with that. But that's not even the worst of it. That's not even the worst of it. They lie, they deceive, and now they out to do even more harm. That's why Mitch McConnell, in the interview he gave to Bloomberg, and if you look at his face, you can clearly tell he is a liar. He said it is a bipartisan problem. Translation, both Democrats and Republicans have been increasing the national debt. Now, I want to take a moment to explain to you the difference. Now, when Mitch McConnell said that, what he was referring to is the fact that Obama had to borrow money, increase the national debt as well. But let's look at the big difference between what Obama did and what Trump did. If you have a house and the roof is leaking all over the place, different parts of the roof is leaking, your boiler went kaput, breakdown, you have been handed a report that you may have termite. You have problem. No matter how much in debt you are, you have no other choice but to borrow some more money to fix the problem. You cannot live in a house with a leaking roof. Can you? You cannot live in a house where the boiler is not working. Can you? So it doesn't matter whether you are in debt or not, you're going to borrow money to fix the problem. The analogy is when Obama took over the administration of the country, everything was going wrong. Roof leaking, termite. The country was in a financial meltdown. The auto industry was going down bankrupt. Banking industry were failing. Now, you can have all kind of arguments you want about that the Obama administration did increase the national debt. There is no if and but about that. But nobody in their right mind, in his or her right mind, would argue the fact that he didn't have a reason to do that. Nobody can possibly argue that fact. It doesn't matter how much you hated Obama, but there was problem in the country, plenty of problem, financial problem all over the place. Any sound-minded individual, Democrat or Republican, would have done exactly that in order to fix the problem. That's the analogy of your house that has a leaking roof, that has a boiler problem. No matter how much in debt you are, you cannot be talking about paying down the debt because you have to fix the house first. Now, by contrast, when Donald Trump walked into the Oval Office, the economy was doing just fine, was doing great. Companies were doing record revenue, record profit. Everything, Wall Street was already booming. There was absolutely no reason whatsoever to borrow money and add to the national debt. This is night and day. So you cannot compare that Obama had to borrow money. Yes, he did increase the national debt. He had to borrow money to fix the problem. Republicans and Donald Trump had no reason whatsoever to do so. So this is not, there is no comparison. So when Mitch McConnell said it's a bipartisan problem, again, as usual, Republicans are trading in deception. One, he is not a stupid individual. He knows that the previous administration had to increase the debt in order to fix the problem in the country. He knows that. But he wants to put it in the same category. It's not the same. He's relying on the ignorance of the Republican constituent to buy that argument. Oh yes, Democrats have been increasing the debt too. So what's the big deal? It is a big difference if you go to the bank and borrow $100,000 to go on a trip. In case if you were to contrast that with borrowing $100,000 to fix leaking roof, boiler problem, and so on, that's a major difference. So no, it's not a bipartisan problem. Republicans have the knack of doing exactly those kind of things and rely on an ignorance constituency to buy their argument. They trade exclusively in deception. Now, that caught my attention when Mr. McConnell proposed to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Not only they borrow the money to give to those who already have, they lied to us about why they were doing what they were doing. They stick us with a bill, but that's not enough. Now Mitch McConnell comes and say, we're going to cut your Social Security benefit and your Medicare benefit as well. I have issue with that. Social Security, Medicare are not handout. They are due to us. We, the people, when we work, we pay into the Social Security. We pay into the Medicare. It's not a handout. It's not a government handout to us. When we get old, when we can no longer work, when we retire, the government is not doing us any favor. It is money while we're working, we put into the system. So when Mitch McConnell come and say that, he's trying to say, well, since it's a government handout, then we can cut it and pay for the debt. First, we didn't ask Mitch McConnell to go and get and borrow money to give to those who already have, because that's exactly what happened. It's not a theory. It's not a speculation. It's not an assumption. It's available to you. Go to the Congressional Budget Office and you find that the information is in black and white for you to see. They borrow $1.5 trillion. They took $1.2 trillion out of that and give to large corporation and wealthy individual. They distribute $300 billion to us, the people. A small piece of the pie, 10% of it. But they stick us with a bill of $1.5 trillion. Now that's not enough. Mitch McConnell come back and said, well, you may not feel the pain yet because currently that's exactly what some Republican constituents are saying. I'm very grateful I'm getting $40 or $60 on my paycheck. Yes, you do not feel the pain just yet, but I guarantee you, your kids, your grandkids, your great-grandkids, and beyond will be paying for that. And that's what irks me the most, because the money that's borrowed were given to large corporation and wealthy individual, and guess what? They will pay 0 penny out of that. Yes, they receive most of the money. We are responsible to pay for the whole thing. And that's not an assumption either. This is the way the legislation for that money was structured. Yes, when Republicans come to you and say, this is your money, we're going to give you a tax cut. It would be nice. I'm not saying it would be good, because it is totally stupid to borrow money to give to people, because we already have debt. It's not like we don't have, there is no national debt. There is already a national debt growing. So even if the money was actually going to be borrowed to give to us, it still would not have been a good idea, let alone. So it's borrowed to give to and given to large corporation and wealthy individual, and now we are stuck with a bill. Now that's not enough for the Republican legislator. Now they come back and say, well, you know, the national debt is growing, then we should take care of that. Seriously? It wasn't growing before the $1.5 trillion? After taking that money and give to people who did not care for it, who did not have a need for it, and now come back to cut my Social Security and my Medicare? You didn't think of that before? Social Security and Medicare are not government handout. We, the people, pay into them. Yes, we pay into Social Security, we pay into Medicare, so that when we retire, when we get old, we can no longer work, we can get some of that back. This is not a handout. I'll be right back. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. It is a time for action. Yes, it is a time sound-minded individuals, decent and morally bound Americans take over the operation and the functioning of our government. Because for far too long, we have entrusted the legislators in Washington and in our respective states to attend to the interests of the country. But they have violated our trust. They have instead attended to their own selfish interests and in the process destroyed the very institution which have guaranteed a system of justice and protected our democracy. We, the people, we do also have our share of responsibility. We are responsible for this predicament. You see, the members of the Republican parties in general have been in Washington for several decades. Mitch McConnell have been there for 3+ decades. Orrin Hatch, Lindsey Graham, they have been there for far too long. We, the people, have been too disengaged in the political discussion and in political debate. We, the people, have been deceived by the legislators who have mastered the art of deception, the art of pinning one party against the other, one constituent against the other. They have completely abandoned the reason for which they were elected. On February 2017, the Republican Party passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut, which was opposed by a majority, more than 60%. And later in the year, they tried to kill Obamacare after trying 62 times under Obama, now in the second time under Donald Trump. More than 20 million people are covered under Obamacare. And yet, election after election, the Republican constituent send those same individuals back to Washington. Although both political parties are to blame for the state of the Republic, the Republican Party has long lost its way. GOP leaders have abandoned the principles, the virtues the party used to stand for. By most analysis, the GOP legislators do not think in terms of the country. They do not think in terms of future generation. They seek instant gratification. It is time. It is well overdue that we, the people, put an end to this madness. It is time we get rid of those who have abandoned the very purpose for which we elected them. I'll be right back. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. We are discussing back to the fight of the entitlement. But before we proceed, I wish to provide you some information that are important that will serve the purpose of helping those who are either already in retirement or close to retirement, or have family members who are in retirement or about to get into retirement. This is the information about the Medicare, the government side. First, keep in mind that there are a lot of crooks on the internet. If you Google Medicare, you will find zillions of websites that come as link for Medicare information. And some of them have actually emulated, or mimic rather, the Medicare.gov website, where it is the same logo and everything looks identical to the government website, but it is not. And the reason that those crooks are on the internet is to steal your information, name, social security, date of birth, and they can do a number of things with your information. So I encourage you, if you are already in Medicare, or you are you're going to become eligible for Medicare soon, or if you have parents who are in Medicare, or you know someone who will be eligible for Medicare soon, I strongly encourage you to go on Medicare.gov and make sure you do not Google it. You type that on your web browser, www.medicare.gov. And if you have a link, if you don't see the Medicare.gov as part of the link, chances are you are not on the correct site. And a number of people, individuals, have been taken for a ride, not just in Social Security, which I mentioned last time, that there are a lot of crooks on the internet waiting to prey on those who are not computer savvy. Even people who have some knowledge about computer can be taken for a ride. So if you are going to the Social Security site, which is ssa.gov, if you are going to Medicare site, which is medicare.gov, make certain that you type that information. You do not Google it, because there is a very good chance that because of the confusion out there, you may click on a website which will look identical to the Medicare.gov. They will ask you for information. You will provide those information, and from that point forward, your life will be turned upside down. So please, and if you're not certain, that number you see on the screen, there is one number which is the main number, and there is also the number which is preceded preceded with the TTY, which is a number for those who are deaf or have hard time to hear. So that number you can use if you have that problem, but have someone call for you, have someone sign you up on Medicare.gov if you're not able to do it for yourself, because it is important, because once you sign up, you won't have any reason every time you try to access the Medicare.gov for you to have to provide your personal information. And one more tidbit of information, that there is the enrollment into Medicare had already started. That's October 15, and it will end on December the 7th. Although you have plenty of time, but it is advisable for you to take care of that as soon as possible so that you don't have to worry about it as time goes by. So again, please do not Google Medicare.gov, do not Google Social Security for you to provide information. Go directly to the government site, and there, and if you're not certain, I provided the number for Social Security, and here is again the number for Medicare. If you're not sure, call the number and ask for the information. But for no reason should you go into some link provided after you Google Medicare, because it is more likely that you will be heading to one of those sites which are waiting to prey on your information. And your life would be turned upside down, because once those crooks get hold of your information, they do whatever they so like with the information. They use it. They may even end up collecting your paycheck, your Medicare check, your Social Security check rather. So do not provide the easy way for those crooks to get to your information. I'll be right back.
If people say your dreams are crazy, if they laugh at what you think you can do, good. Stay that way. Because what non-believers fail to understand is that calling a dream crazy is not an insult. It's a compliment. Don't try to be the fastest runner in your school or the fastest in the world. Be the fastest ever. Don't picture yourself wearing OBJ's jersey. Picture OBJ wearing yours. Don't settle for homecoming queen or linebacker. Do both. Lose 120 pounds and become an Ironman after beating a brain tumor. Don't believe you have to be like anybody to be somebody. If you're born a refugee, don't let it stop you from playing soccer for the national team at age 16. Don't become the best basketball player on the planet. Be bigger than basketball. Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything. When they talk about the greatest team in the history of the sport, make sure it's your team. If you have only one hand, don't just watch football. Play it at the highest level. And if you're a girl from Compton, don't just become a tennis player. Become the greatest athlete ever. Yeah, that's more like it. So don't ask if your dreams are crazy. Ask if they're crazy enough.
Whether you are a Democrat or Republican, it is your duty to make decisions which help improve the nation for future generations. Politicians in general are not known to be people of integrity. They lie to you to get your vote. They lie to you to get your support. And for the past few decades, it has been more than obvious. Yes, both parties have been trading in deception. Republican Party in general have been doing everything possible to harm the constituent, to hurt the constituent. In 1935, Franklin Roosevelt signed into law the Social Security Act. Republicans said no and opposed it. When the act was passed, they tried many times to kill it. 1965, Lyndon Roosevelt signed into law the Title 18 as part of Social Security to provide Medicare to those who are advanced in age. Republicans overwhelmingly said, no way, we don't want it. And they tried many times to kill it. In 2010, Obama passed the Obamacare, which provide more than health coverage to more than 20 million people in the country. Republicans overwhelmingly said no. They tried under Obama 62 times to get rid of it, and they already tried twice under Donald Trump to kill it. And Mitch McConnell, in his latest interview, said if they keep the House, they're going to try again. Yes, the Republican legislators, they have not worked to advance the affairs of the nation. Now, can you possibly imagine a life without Social Security? Can you possibly imagine a life without Medicare? Both of which were opposed and attempted to be eliminated by Republicans. And even as late as a few years ago, they tried to privatize it. Translation, to get rid of it. Yes, you may be a Republican, but hear this. Republicans do not care an iota about the constituent. Their main focus is to serve those who provide campaign financing for their election and their re-election. Yes, Democrats do that too. We know that. But look at what Republicans have been doing exclusively that hurt the country, that hurt the constituent. Who will lose if there is no longer Social Security? Who will lose if there is no longer Medicare? Who will lose if there is Obama is gone? The 20 million people that are currently insured will lose their health care. Who will lose if there is no longer Medicare? The 55 million old people who are currently insured under Medicare. Who will lose if there is no longer Social Security? You see where I'm going. So what Republicans are doing, you don't have to be a genius to figure that out. They do not care about the state of the republic. They do things that harm the nation. So when Mitch McConnell advanced the idea of cutting Social Security, cutting Medicare to pay for money that the Republican Party borrowed for no reason to give to those who already have plenty, I'm not on board because I pay into Social Security. I pay into Medicare so that when I retire, when I get old, those are available for me. It is not a handout. Not for me, not for you, not for anybody who put money into the system. Yes, it is time that you open your eyes, you open your understanding so that you can see very clearly. It is not a matter of Democrat versus Republican. It is a matter of knowledge versus ignorance. Yes, Republicans have been for the longest work to harm you, to hurt the country. Everything that they have been doing, and they trade in deception. Would you have gone for the idea of someone telling you that they're going to borrow $1.5 trillion to give to those who already have? Would you have gone along with that? The answer is no. So they traded in deception by telling you it's a tax cut for you. When the Healthcare Act, aka Obamacare, was passed, would you have gone protesting against it if you knew what actually the healthcare does? No, you wouldn't. But your Republican legislators were on the bandwagon claiming it's a death panel. They trade in deception. They tell you that the healthcare, Obamacare, will cost jobs. So to scare you, they traded in deception. They know that wasn't true because they couldn't possibly explain how in the world that a healthcare act that's going to provide coverage for millions of people will cost jobs. So they trade in deception. They tell you that the doctors are the one that's going to decide whether your parents or your grandparents live or die. They know it's not true. But they say it because they trade in deception. They tell you that, well, if it's going to cost jobs, then you shouldn't really support it. So you went out there protesting against Obamacare. They traded in deception. They tell you that it's going to fall. Obamacare is just going to go away because there is no way in the world it's going to survive because it's too costly. So they lie to you. They trade in deception. When nothing that they said worked, they tell you that Obamacare will just crumble under its own weight because there is no way that this act can possibly survive. 2010, even up to today, what did Republicans do? Now they come up with something brilliant. Because everything that they tell you to deceive you didn't work, now they come up with something brilliant. The Trump administration now is making certain that the day that people have to enroll into the system, which is mostly Sunday, that's when most people go into the healthcare.gov to enroll into Obamacare. Guess what they're doing? Now, they're taking the site down on Sunday. Now, as you can see, it is not speculation. It is not a Democrat versus a Republican thing. Those are facts that Republicans trade in deception. So they try to kill Obamacare. They tell you lie after lie after lie, which did not work. So now they come back and they trying the last possible deception. They say that they have to do maintenance on Sundays. The day that they found out most people go on healthcare.gov to enroll, that's the day they decide to do maintenance. Now you tell me, what kind of people do that? You elected those people to work on your behalf. You elected those people to do things that benefit you, the constituent. But instead, every opportunity that they have, they do things that hurt you. If someone punch you every time they see you, would you support that person? Would you go near that person? Every opportunity the person gets to punch you, punch you. Would you not stay away from that individual? It's simply common sense. But for a reason that defies logic, Republican constituents continue to support those same individuals who continue to hurt them over and over and over. No, I'm not saying that because I'm a Democrat, but because it just doesn't make any sense. You see, I trade in logic. If something doesn't make sense to me, I have to find out why. And if it means that I move away from it, that's what I will do. So what I say here has nothing to do with Democrat or Republican. It has to do with common sense. Someone that does something to hurt you, why would you continue to support that individual? It just doesn't make any sense. Is it because you're a masochist? It just doesn't make any logical sense. Republican legislators in general have been treated in deception. That's what they do. Donald Trump lied to you, but Donald Trump is not the first one to lie to you. He's not the first one to deceive you. The Republicans have been at it for the longest. When Franklin Roosevelt, as part of the New Deal, brought Social Security to the surface as a possibility of having that passed as an act, Republicans came with all sort of argument against it. Now, there is nothing wrong with arguing against something, against a piece of legislation that the other side proposes. There is nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's why we have legislators in Washington to discuss, to debate issues so that they can come up with the best course of action. Not, let's do this because Democrats don't want it. And then when the Democrats are in control, let's do this because Republicans don't want it. Or Republicans are not in power. We're just going to do our own things. The very purpose of legislators in Washington are to find a compromise about doing something that benefits the majority. That's the point. Otherwise, it is not any different than any dictatorship. Because when Republicans are in power, they do whatever they want. When Democrats are in power, they do whatever they want. That's not a democracy. This is not how it works. Republicans passed a $1.5 trillion tax cut for the wealthy. No Democrat input, no Democrat included. They just don't care because they in control. They don't want anything to do with Democrat. They passed a $675 billion defense spending bill. No Democrat included. They just don't care. They push Brett Kavanaugh into the Supreme Court despite the fact that he only had 38% approval. Most people didn't approve him. Republicans don't care because as far as they are concerned, they are in control. Whatever they want to do, that's what they do. The country just doesn't work that way. So it falls on we, the people, to change that predicament. And if we don't, because if we, like the Republican legislators, if we're looking for instant gratification, guess who's going to pay the price? Our kids, our grandkids, our great-grandkids, and beyond. Because whatever we do today is not going to end today. It's going to carry on. I'll be right back. Join me here on the 4th branch at 10:30 a.m. and 6:30 p.m. every Saturday. Republican constituents are in the dark. You see, most Republican constituents, especially those who continue to support Donald Trump, still live very largely in the dark despite the wide availability of the internet. The cause of the problem is not lack of information, but it is rather an inclination to seek for sources of information which support their preset views, however false and misleading. As such, Trumpublicans are more inclined to reject any information which does not support their views, does not please them, or is critical of Donald Trump. In fact, they do not have to look far. Fox propaganda network, known and referred to by most as Fox News, is the major source of misinformation, distorted information, disinformation, wrong information, and even, yes, outright lies. Other sources such as Rush Limbaugh, Breitbart, InfoWar have also greatly contributed to nurture and preserve the dummification of the Republican Party. The problem is exacerbated by GOP legislators who also push false narrative in order to consolidate their base, although it is to the detriment of the country. You see, such posture on the part of the Republican leaders and the GOP propaganda network represent the main conduit to taking the country down the wrong path. Who in the Republican Party will muster enough courage, now that John McCain is gone, to shine the light for the Republican constituents? As of this moment, most in the Republican Party still live completely in the dark. I do thank you for spending the time with me to debate the fight to the entitlement system. A couple of days ago, we talked about the Social Security aspect of it. Today, this morning, and we debated the Medicare aspect of it. And keep in mind that Social Security and Medicare, when you receive those benefits, they are not handout. They're not government handout. They are duly owed to you because when you were younger, when you were working before you retire, you paid into the system. So don't let anybody advance the idea that it's a government handout. It is due to you because you work, you put into the system. When you can no longer work, then the system has to take care of you. So the Republican legislators in general have this idea of trying to explain those benefits as if they are government handout. As such, they can easily come at any time and cut Social Security and cut Medicare. They're not handout. On Monday, we will come back and talk about Medicaid. That's the last part for the entitlement system that Mitch McConnell referred to when he talked about cutting from entitlement system. Because as far as he's concerned, it's okay to borrow money to give to the wealthy and the rich, but come to us and cut on our benefits. It is not acceptable, and we should not stand for it because we did not ask Mitch McConnell and the rest of the Republican Party to go and borrow money to give to those who already have and now come back to us and try to take from us. It's either they're able to do the job for which they were elected, or you should get rid of those individuals because they're incapable of doing the job for which you hired them. So I invite you on Monday on the 4th branch for a discussion on Medicaid. And after that, we will delve even deeper into this aspect of the Republican maneuver, behavior, trading deception, in order to get we, the people, to go along with what their agenda, their selfish agenda is. Have a wonderful afternoon, wonderful evening, whichever that happened to be. Send us a note, write to us, tell us what you're thinking, what kind of topic you would like to see, because we discuss topics based on facts, and you make the decision of doing whatever you so like with that information. I am MD, and this is the 4th branch program. Good night.
The 4th Branch podcast is brought to you in collaboration with the People Branch publication, which can be found on the People Branch website, located at peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org. That's peoplebranch.org website, in which you will find a number of very interesting articles. My name is Mike Duchesne, MD for short. I hope you have a great afternoon or a great evening, whichever it happens to be. Hopefully you can join me again next time for another interesting episode of this podcast. That was the 4th Branch, live from New York. Good day.